Comment section podcast PH episode 5 titled Breonna Taylor, the Queen Who Became a Casualty. Let's get this intro going on out the way. I've done some research on the issue. We've just passed the 1-year anniversary of her death. I'm not really too fond of celebrating a death anniversary, but we have to now look at the facts, review the case, look at what we can do moving forward. It's a lot, honestly, and it's a lot to take in. But let's get this intro going on with shout out Niger, shout out New York, shout out the BX, shout out PS111, shout out OLPH, shout out Chicago, shout out Hume 2 family, shout out UA, shout out Echo 354, and I've recently started doing this. Shout out the people the friends and the family members that I have not been in contact with, but we probably drifted apart. I don't know. It's nothing malicious. It's nothing personal. It's just different stages in life. Shout out to the friends that we haven't spoken to in a while or seen each other. So hope you guys are doing good. Hope it's all love. But today's episode, as per title, let's focus on Breonna Taylor. And there's a lot to focus on, honestly. Let's get right into it. Normally, I am unscripted, but I didn't want to serve this issue without actually having the script, actually having some facts. I will then later post some of the facts on the case and on the issue later on in the title description once I post the episode. So let's get through it. Breonna Taylor. On March 13th, 2020, Breonna Taylor was the casualty of a botched criminal investigation. This is the best way to put it. And this is not me being biased on the police department. This is not me saying, okay, it's F the police, okay, it's, Black Lives Matter. It's not. This is just focusing on the facts, and the facts of the matter says that there was a botched police investigation that resulted in a raid on Breonna Taylor's home that led to her death due to the hands of police officers that shot and killed her. Now, what do we know about Breonna Taylor? We know that she was a 26-year-old EMT worker. No criminal history, and the same can be said for her sister who lived with her, and no drug-related offenses for her boyfriend at the time, and his name is Kenneth Walker. Now, on that day, Breonna Taylor had Kenneth Walker recounts the story of telling the news reporters that they were sitting in their home watching a movie that they fell asleep with after playing Uno and spending time together. And I believe this story hits us harder, or it hits us deeper at home, because we feel like it could be any one of us. A lot of the times when we hear like the shooting deaths of people by police officers, they always have a criminal history. They always were in something that they weren't supposed to be doing. They were always doing something that they were not supposed to be doing. It's always a negative background or connotation. What's up, Lay? How are you doing? But it's always some type of dark story riddled around who the police are shooting. That's a person of color. Literally, we can have a race of information and we'll probably lose it, but by the time they get to the prison, or by the time they get to the jailhouse, they already have the full backstory of every demonizing action that they've ever taken, listed across like the boards, listed across social media, listed across the news networks. And it really just denotes a kind of demoralizing atmosphere when it comes to defending the character of people of color that are shot and killed by police officers, because it's instant that a society would look at police officers as the saviors, as the heroes, and in the agencies across the board that have predominantly more white officers than they do have officers of color. It's almost seemed like, white people are the saviors, are the heroes. They're defending the streets. They're saving lives. And that much can be said that, in a lot of cases, it is true. Like most police officers are white. That's a fact across the board. A lot of police officers do their job and do their job well and accordingly. That's also a fact. But for the officers that don't do their job well, where do we draw the line? So you'll see in this podcast episode that I try to highlight exactly what went wrong with this entire Breonna Taylor situation and case, because a lot of things went wrong. So moving forward, I want people to remember that this happened in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, this is not the focus on their basketball team or on March Madness. This is just the This is just a statement. This is just a location. So, Detective Joshua Janes. All right, I want you guys to remember that name because that is a person of interest in this case, and he's also one of the detectives or officers that was later fired and indicted by a grand jury. All right. So this entire situation begins when Detective Joshua Janes applies for 5 affidavits seeking a judge's permission to obtain no-knock search warrants on the Taylor residence and a few other residents that were identified in the investigation. Ooh, excuse me. Like per any podcast episode, I have a bottle of water. I will be taking my first sip today, so. Oof. Here we go. So, where do we begin and why is Detective Joshua Janes a person of interest in this case? He is a person of interest in this case because the no-knock warrant that he applied for is later being disputed by the judge in the case. The judge was Jefferson Circuit Judge Mary Shaw. Now, Jefferson Circuit Judge Mary Shaw signed off on these affidavits for the no-knock search warrants to be placed. And the only reason why they were signed off on because the Louisville and Jefferson police departments had a narcotics probe on Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend of 2 years at that time. His name was Jamarcus Glover. Now, Glover was the focus on the investigation. Why did Breonna Taylor's house get raided? Because of Jamarcus Glover and his narcotics ties and his focus and him being the focus of a narcotics investigation and probe. What's good, my guy? Now this leads into the events that happened that led to Breonna Taylor's death. Okay, so the judge signs off on the warrants, and then the detective Joshua Janes then gets the team together, that gets the raid team together, which includes SWAT officers, which includes detectives, and also includes local law enforcement. It's a whole raid. This means that they're preparing to see some level of resistance. The fact that they even went for no-knock search warrants meant that they meant to go in there to achieve or attain some evidence or item that they feared that if they announced their presence would have been destroyed upon their announce. Like, that's really the sort of sole purpose of a no-knock search warrant. You don't want to alert the criminal that's inside the house that, hey, we're coming in to take whatever, and now you can have time to start dumping shit down the drain and shit like that, or just doing whatever the fuck you want to do. The purpose of a no-knock search warrant is to not knock, not announce, just come straight in, wrap people up, lay people down if you have to, and then get the evidence and information that you need, or the person that you are looking to get. So here's the misconception. Number one, Breonna Taylor's name and address was listed on one of these search warrants. It was not a mistake. She was implicated because of her connection to Jamarcus Glover. Now, the problem I have about this is because they didn't do enough research. Breonna Taylor had been removed from that relationship for over 2 years at that moment. She was living with her boyfriend at the time, who was Kenneth Walker, and her sister. She had no prior criminal records whatsoever. She worked as an EMT, and she was an essential worker during the pandemic when it first kicked off. If anybody did their research or did their homework, they would understand that this woman really didn't need to be implicated in a no-knock search warrant. But the only thing that led them to actually writing her name down on that search warrant and wanting to search her property was because that Jamarcus Glover had sent her a package months prior to the actual raid. And because he was being watched and monitored because of his because of the narcotics probe and his dealings in the drug market or drug trade in Louisville, they followed that. They suspected that package contained drug paraphernalia or drugs itself that would then be used as evidence to then, help them create a more solid case against Jamarcus Glover. Now, here's where things go wrong, and this is why I have a person of interest listed on Joshua Janes. Okay, so if you don't know much about the legal process in this country, I suggest you start doing some research. I am a criminal justice major myself with a focus in cybersecurity. So I am very much aware. This is kind of some of the stuff we go over in some of my classes. So for an officer or for a detective to go get a search warrant, the search warrants are important because you have Fourth Amendment rights that protect you against, unwarranted searches and seizures, and basically, Fourth Amendment protects your privacy in a sense. All right. So now officers can't just, come into your house, guns blazing, and off of no probable cause, off of nothing, and just try to, pick up evidence and pick up contraband. It's completely illegal. So remember that fact, because you'll see why this entire debacle is a mess to begin with. So Joshua James, implicates that, Breonna Taylor's house deserves to be searched. And this Judge Mary Shaw, I believe I said that name correctly. Yep. She signs off on the warrants. And it's said that she signed off on the warrants incredibly fast. Like, they brought up the warrants to her. She signed them all in under 12 minutes. And the lettering on the warrants, which isn't the judge's fault, the lettering on the warrant is because of the application led by the detective in the case, which is Joshua James. So the lettering in the warrant literally just was a copy and paste. Like, each warrant is supposed to be specific to a certain property or item that you were intentionally looking for. But in his case, it was just a simple copy and paste. The only thing differed with the address and then the name of Breonna Taylor herself. So that is a problem to begin with. And the problem doesn't state that it's a misuse and abuse of power. So when you're in the legal system, you're supposed to take these things seriously. When they teach us about case briefings and, or how to read court records and stuff like that, the lettering and the wording is very much important because it's what is pulled in court, and it's what the legal system depends on to actually have some weight and merit and reputation and integrity in the cases. Now, when officers, or detectives in this case, decide that they want to, cut corners, go around, just push something through and get it to a judge just so they can write off on it so they can get a quick arrest. That is the issue here. And that you can see that's the main issue here. I am one person that says this is really not racially charged. You might disagree, but the fact that, it was tagged on with the Black Lives Matter protest and everything, people might view it a certain way, especially at that time, because George Floyd's case was, getting national spotlight, and then it prompted people to look into the Breonna Taylor case. But I don't believe it was racially charged. I just believe this is the result of a system that operates a certain way to combat crime, and they then cut corners and they then scratch each other's backs and they try to get these people locked up or put away. And there are casualties in that process. And you can clearly see in this case, Breonna Taylor was a casualty in that process. Now, it doesn't, I would say it calls for overhaul or vamped or a increase in liability when it comes to people who are in this situation, because you cannot just get into a judge's face, write up some, bullshit kind of search warrant just to go search a property that you suspected for having drug paraphernalia because of a 2-year-old relationship that has been done with, over somebody who doesn't have any criminal records, has no intention or relation to people in that market or community. Now, the problem about this is that that's all it takes. Like, I don't think people understand that is all it takes. That's how people in the system, that's how law enforcement, this is how they operate. They don't try to look at you and just say, oh, that's just a black woman, or that's just a black man just trying to live his life the right way, staying above, staying away from the law enforcement, staying away from the streets, living their life accordingly. Now, they look at you as off the company that you keep or have kept. That's why it's important. It's very much important. I preach about this and I talk about this to my friends, to my family members. Yo, the street life ain't it. Like, it's not it. And the people that are in the streets that want to, champion the streets, want to champion, killing people, selling drugs in that type of lifestyle, like, they're foolish for it, because it really only warrants two things. There's barely any happy endings. Like, if we don't learn about this in school growing up, especially people like us, people of color, were targeted the most. We might not be the ones that are literally funneling the drugs into our community, but we'll be the ones that will go to jail for it. So understand that you have a target on your back because of the skin color that you possess and because of where you're living. So if you understand that, the drug game really is not it. And I'm not marking that as people who are in the drug game like, oh, like, you didn't have any other. Trust me, I understand. Feel me? Like sometimes it's just what you're born into, what seems the most feasible, what seems like, can make you some money so you can get out. But I think people forget that the goal, the drive on being in that type of business, being in that type of drug game is to get out of the drug game. And in this situation, we had somebody that had some sense of relationship with somebody who was in the drug game, and that led to her death. And that's the problem, is because as we look at outside entities like, coming into our communities and killing us, putting us in jail, we also have to look at ourselves. We have to look at our own brothers and sisters, and we got to hold each other accountable. Like, yo, you're doing things that can put me in danger. That's why, the Bible speaks about, iron sharpens iron, feel me? And there's an old proverb saying that you can tell a man or a woman by the company that they keep. So if you are keeping, drug dealing partners or whatever, or people around you, guess what? You're going to be viewed as a drug dealer, as a racketeer, as a gangster, as a thug. And that's not saying that you are, but that's the price of fame. I'm not going to hold you. You want to be around people that do that stuff. Then guess what? When outside entities, when other societies, other cultures look at you, when the police look at you, when law enforcement look at you, that's what they see. They don't differentiate. They don't care if you're in a suit. They don't care that you're doing this. They don't care that you're going to college. They don't care that you're an EMT worker in the middle of a pandemic saving lives. If you are ever messed with a drug dealer, been around the drug game, then guess what? You're suspected of doing that type of lifestyle. You're suspected of defending that. You're suspected of being that. You're suspected of portraying that lifestyle. And that's basically the mindset and mentality that led to Breonna Taylor's death. It's really just by association, she was targeted. And this is not saying that the association is anything crazy, but by association, she was targeted. And it is ridiculous to say that's all it takes, but it's a sad reality. And I got some people doing some work downstairs, so I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. I think they're just heading out. They're fixing the gate. All right, but that's the sad reality of it. It's just by association, Breonna Taylor was targeted. So as we continue with this case, we look at the fact that Jamarcus Glover, who was later arrested, I believe that same night or around the area or around the time, because there were other no-knock search warrants that were led to his arrest. See what law enforcement agencies like to do? They do an entire the raid isn't just one place. Feel me? They'll do an entire sweep on the locations of other people. They'll do an entire sweep of they'll do just sorry, I think my brother just came in and just completely threw me off my talking point. But yeah, they'll do an entire sweep of the entire organization. Anybody connected, any place that they'll find evidence, any place that they'll find some type of connection, they'll actually go in and they'll incorporate that place with their raid. And looking forward past that this is what led to Breonna Taylor's death. She dated the drug dealer, Jamarcus Glover, as told. The package was sent to her crib or her house at that time, and that's what police officers were looking at during that moment. 1 second, Okay, so the implication was all it took for Breonna Taylor to gain, or her residence, for cops to look at her residence and say, hey, we want to target that house for a no-knock search warrant. Now, leading up to that night, the officers, they had a no-knock search warrant to enter the house or the apartment of Breonna Taylor, but it is stated that they did knock and they did announce themselves. This is something that officers didn't have to do. That's the thing that people don't understand. It wasn't the wrong house. They knew exactly who they were going in there for. They knew exactly what they were looking for, in a sense, even though it wasn't really substantiating on much. But They walked in there knowing what they wanted to do. They actually acted out on that warrants with a little bit more professional, with a more professional courtesy than most law enforcement agencies would do. If you have a no knock warrant, you don't come in knocking. You don't say, hey, it's the police. You literally just go to the door, you kick it right in, you catch people while their pants are down, and then you start wrapping people up. That's the purpose. You don't announce people. So that's a little bit of discrepancies when we'll get later into what Kenneth Walker says and what happened that led to Breonna Taylor being shot. But yeah. So the police officers state that they knocked and they announced themselves several times, which also leads into the idea that the officers knew that Taylor wasn't really a threat. Or I believe that someone would have known that she wasn't really a threat. She wasn't really like a criminal threat or somebody that that was going to shoot back or something like that. Because if you have a no knock warrant and you are knocking at the door, letting them know that you are officers trying to come in, then that means that you wanted to enter the facility without, bloodshed, without any, shots fired. At least somebody in that raid party wanted to do that, because there was no call for them to actually knock and announce themselves coming into the apartment. They did that out of courtesy. And now the problem persists once they knocked and once they announced and they heard nothing back, because you have to understand, Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend, they have nothing to do with this. They are sitting there enjoying their night. They're in their beds. They're falling asleep, dozing off, just enjoying a nice evening. And you can say that the officers may have knocked and announced, but all you can probably hear is the loud knocking instead of the actual yelling. So, because if I'm upstairs in my room and somebody comes downstairs through my house, I can hear them knocking, but I probably won't be hearing them saying anything. Or in that situation where my brother came in and started whistling, it takes a certain amount of distance for actual sound to travel in certain areas. But if you yell loud enough outside, I could probably hear you, but that's to say the TV isn't on and I'm in dead silence. So you have to look at that case in the Breonna Taylor situation where, as a black man or a woman, if the cops are at your door, normally you respond in a very passive manner. You don't respond abrasively, because we've seen exactly, how police officers can, mistreat, mishandle, or get really physical with certain black people. But in this case, I find it very hard to believe that two black individuals heard police at their door at an ungodly hour in the night and decided to grab weapons to then confront police officers and SWAT. It's just not feasible, especially if they're not, in that type of lifestyle, especially if they're just, regular workers. She's an EMT. I forgot what exactly he did, but they're not that type of people. They're not, they don't keep like kilos in their apartment. There was no drugs found inside the apartment. The entire apartment was clean. And that was the issue. It's just like, feasibly speaking, no black person that I know personally would hear police officers at their door and be like, all right, I guess I got to grab my gun and go point it at officers that are coming into my house with hostile intent. No. If I hear police are at my door, I'm coming in, I'm making sure, the lights is on, they can see me, feel me, I can see them, and there's no I'm going for my wallet for some ID and I get shot, because that's the harsh reality that we live in as, black people in this country. Like, we just got to face it. We move differently when it comes to dealing with law enforcement, when it comes to dealing with police officers. And that's just facts. I don't think I would ever be in a situation, especially if I'm living with my significant other and family, that I would ever put their lives in jeopardy because I'm going to do something as stupid as point a weapon at police officers when they come into my house, which leads me to believe that this is not me saying that, Breonna Taylor or her boyfriend are stupid in the situation of pointing a weapon at officers. It's leading me to the situation to actually hearken back on their story, or his story, that they really didn't know who was at that door. Because, if somebody's banging at your door and you're like, yo, who is it? And they're not really saying anything. Yeah, you can grab a gun because you're just like, okay, they're trying to come in. Like, you can tell, somebody's really viciously banging at your door. Okay, they trying to get inside my house. So I got to grab my weapon to defend myself. But if the police are banging at your door, you're not thinking get weapon, defend yourself as a black American, as a person of color living in this country, because you don't want to give them a reason to shoot at you. You don't want to give them a reason to make you a poster child for, the Black Lives Matter movement or marching or anything. You want to preserve your life. So I find it very hard and difficult to understand that, Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor would poise themselves in defensive positions when cops are coming into their home. I believe that the police officers may have said that they announced. They probably knocked. They did knock and announce, but that was not heard or made clear to Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend at the time. I just believe that there was some level of miscommunication, or the sound was just distorted, so Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend did not hear what was going on at that time. So that is the main issue about the entire, events that led into the police breaking into the door, because they break down the door. This is what SWAT does. This is what, a raid does. In the military, they teach you how to breach and clear. So they're probably stacking. So the point man is coming in. They're stacking in behind each other. They're looking for any visible threats. And if they're breaching a door and the first thing that they see is somebody pointing a gun, that is an issue. Because in that split second decision, you don't decide, is he going to shoot? Is he just brandishing a gun at me? Do I have to not worry about shooting back? Because if you don't shoot back and they start opening fire, you as the point man, you're going to be done for. Then you're going to put your fire team, and this is me speaking with military experience, your fire team at risk behind you, because the point man's down. The secondary position gunner is going to have to take point and then lay down covering fire or fire in response to the situation. But I believe police officers have a similar militaristic training when it comes to stacking and breaching an apartment building or a facility. So the point man in this situation, which I believe to be one of the detectives, I believe it's to be detective either Detective Miles Cosgrove, or it's the officer Brett Hankinson. Those are the two names that they're also persons of interest in this story. So remember those names closely. But in this situation, it's hard to say that we've already talked about, Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend's side saying that, it's not feasible for black people to hear the police officers at their door, to notice that it's going to be a raid, to notice that these people have weapons drawn, to notice that these people have the intention of breaking in and getting into their home, to then brandish a weapon at police officers. It's just not feasible. Black people don't do that. It's not how we are. We're not going to try to go out in a blaze of glory, especially if we're not in that lifestyle, especially if I'm just chilling, watching Netflix. But the police want to come in, fine by me. Like, we going to figure this out, because I'm not going to get shot over some stupidity. I'm not going to get shot because somebody wants to view me as a criminal on their way of breaching in and search and doing a raid. It's just not feasible. And I feel like in Breonna's situation, in Kenneth Walker's situation, they did not know that the officers were coming in like that. And that is also like, we're going to look at a lot of the semantics behind the situation, and then we're going to realize that there's a lot of mess that happens in this situation, but the reason behind the mess is because of poor procedural actions that were taken by detectives and the officers leading into the raid. So what I mean by that is that after Breonna Taylor is then, shot, she was shot twice by Detective Cosgrove. His name is Miles Cosgrove. He was fired alongside with Detective Joshua James, because James actually faced issues because the judge, Mary Sho, later went on to state to the FBI, whose job was to investigate the legality and the ethics of that, of the search warrant that led to these matter of events. After the FBI investigated the search warrant for the application for Taylor's apartment, the Judge Shaw later stated to the FBI that she believed that the detective lied to her when she was in order to obtain the warrant, and that's why she signed off on the warrant. Because you got to understand, it's a very professional relationship between detectives, law enforcement, and judges. The system goes hand in hand, and remember that type of relationship is the reason why later on you'll see that the indictments did not grant any charges, or the charges against the officers did not proceed to go further in criminal court, because it's a very casual business-like relationship. When you're talking about law enforcement officers and when you're talking about lawyers and prosecutors, it's a very close and tight-knit process, because they're just different sides of the law. One is actively out there enforcing the law, and the other one is interpreting the law and setting people to jail or setting people free. It's just how the system operates. It's like basically my relationship with the mailman. The mailman comes, drops off the mail. I say what's up, feel me, pick up the mail, go inside my crib. That's just the relationship. So we got to understand that when we're looking into this entire situation. So going back to the events of that night, Kenneth Walker, who is actually, taken out of the house, he's visibly distraught, with the body cam films and everything like that, is telling the officers that, we didn't know, like, you guys she was talking back. She was saying that, who was at the door? Nobody said anything. And I believe that much is feasible, as much as, we shouldn't really take too much, truth into account when somebody is distraught. It's immediately following an encounter. Immediately following a traumatizing encounter, because they tell you in the court system that that's not the best eyewitness testimony at the time. Some things might be distraught, some things might be jumbled, things might be up in air. You're not going to get the full story. It's questioning somebody that just experienced something traumatic, and that's the problem that criminals or people of interest or suspects face, because you'll be in a very traumatizing situation and immediately have to go to a dark room and speak to officers for hours, going over a story and them trying to figure out what's going on, and maybe sometimes even trying to pin the charges on you. And it's different when it comes to police officers in our society, because they can go through something traumatic like this. They can shoot Breonna Taylor and go home, relax, unwind, talk to their other cop friends, and go over stories and see if they, can get their thoughts together to actually say what really happened, or they can start creating, a false narrative behind what really went down. And that's the kind of leeway we as a society give police officers in this country, where they have they're in an ethical position to have the benefit of the doubt. Just how regular citizens in this country, we have, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that we committed a crime. When it comes to police officers, they have an extremely broader protection when it comes to getting committed of a crime, because we look at police officers in this country, not saying that you as a black person, you probably feel a certain way about police officers. That's understandable. But the majority of people in this country view officers with a certain, reverence, with a certain respect. And that's why the law also channels that, because if society feels a certain way, then the laws will then, equate that and then reflect that feelings. That's why in, our criminal justice system, police officers have a certain amount of leeway when it comes to, not facing criminal charges for murdering an individual, because it's believed to be a part of their job, a part of the risk that they take, because they're also putting their lives on the line. So moving forward, we also saw that there was issues when people, first when initially finding out about the information. There was a lot of misinformation going around saying, oh, they shot her in the bed. Oh, it was a wrong search warrant. No, it was a correct search warrant, but the methods to get that search warrant were kind of misled, or they basically lied. And that's another issue. That's a criminal issue. So if you are a detective, right, and you falsify or, exaggerate information to get a search warrant, that's technically you going on oath. You're under oath, and you are lying and you are fabricating information in order to get something done. That is a criminal offense. Okay. 1 second. I got to take a drink of water. In Breonna Taylor's situation, she suffered as a casualty because of somebody's, ignorance or ineptitude, which would be Joshua James. So following the Breonna Taylor situation, they arrested Kenneth Walker, right? And they kept him in prison for about 6 days. And then the grand jury indicted him for the crimes of attempted murder and assault on an officer, which the charges were later dropped about 2 months later, and he was freed. Okay, so following all this is when the investigations really start taking place, and people are really trying to figure out what went wrong in this situation. And that led to the indictments, the firing of 3 officers. It will be Detective Joshua James, the detective that actually, put up the application for the search warrant. Detective Miles Cosgrove, who was believed to have shot 16 shots. Two of those shots ended up striking and killing Breonna Taylor in her hallway. And lastly, you have Officer Brett Hankinson, who is believed to have endangered the lives of the neighbors during the raid by his the shots that he fired in the dark that didn't really have any trajectory, or he didn't know where he was shooting at, basically. Heard that they also did another raid at another spot, and you're not supposed to do two at once to try and avoid situations like that. That is true, and that's the point I'm trying to get to. In the process of getting these, they went for 5 affidavits to get these no-knock search warrants, and they were doing them at the same time in order to catch as much information as possible. It's like basically casting a large net in order to get as much fish as possible. But in this situation, because somebody had exaggerated the connection between Breonna Taylor and her ex-boyfriend of 2 years, she was targeted in this no-knock raid, and then that led to her death. Because the problem is, we can argue about the ethics of how she died, the intent of the officers in how she died, but you have to understand, if that no-knock warrant was not passed, if it wasn't signed off on, Breonna Taylor would still be alive. The officers wouldn't be there. So I believe when people started focusing on their anger and their and focusing on the narrative of saying, arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor, let's really focus on who needs to be arrested. All right. Now, who really needs to be arrested? I wrote this down on the other side of the pages, where we can focus on the 3 officers that were fired. And I don't mean that the officers that shot at her out of the, no, there was multiple officers in that encounter, and there was also SWAT personnel in that encounter that fired shots at Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend. The cops that were fired actually had there was charges, or they broke their contracts against their department. The department has a certain amount of code of ethics and code of I'm losing the word here, but there was actions that they took that basically broke the rules within the department. Now, the problem about that is this: because being a police officer is a job, you can get fired from the job and not have to suffer any legal ramifications from getting fired from that job. But it also works hand in hand. They can get fired from the job and also be indicted on criminal charges for their actions in whatever they did. In the first case, Joshua James, he lied, or he falsified some information to obtain that warrant, that no-knock warrant on Breonna Taylor's house. That no-knock warrant on Breonna Taylor's house led to 2 other officers endangering the lives of fellow officers and of the neighbors in that situation, and 1 other officer striking and killing Breonna Taylor in that situation. So the problem is, at the top, who's supposed to really be going down for something like this is the person that made this happen, that made this possible. You can try to blame the judge. The judge should have been wiser in signing off on a warrant like this, but you got to understand, that's that professional relationship. If my detectives are coming up to me, they're like, yo, we really want this Jamarcus Glover guy who's really been trafficking drugs and, been implicated on this. And, he's just a problem in the streets. They're going to be like, yeah, I believe that, go do your thing, detective, because they have that professional relationship and that courtesy of understanding that, oh, this person, he's a stand-up guy. He's trying to get these people off the streets, and let's help him out in that process. But the problem is, when you have somebody like that with a reputation, and they totally cut corners, they bypass guidelines, they falsify information, and then that leads to the death of an innocent civilian. This is when there needs to be a level of accountability. It's not focused on the cops that were just in the raid that shot her. No, because that's when you have to understand that in order to get that to happen, a bunch of steps have to occur. And I don't believe that people understand what needs to happen in order for that to occur. So first things first, you need to notice the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron. All right. definitely a lot of moving parts besides the actual police. It's like that's the thing about the Breonna Taylor situation. It's not necessarily police brutality. It's more of a misuse or obstruction of justice case. Like, it's really just focused on the structural integrity of how they achieved that warrant and how they operated that then led to her death. Because you can say that in the situation outside of the cop that was, because there was a funny little anecdote that was said in the firing letter of Detective Miles Cosgrove. He fired in 3 different directions, indicating that he did not verify a threat or have target acquisition. In the Army, they tell you straight up, if you don't have any intention of shooting your weapon, that shit better be on safety and it better not be pointed at anything. But if you do have an intention, you better know exactly what you're shooting at and you better eliminate the target. So if you're just in a fucking room firing in 3 different directions, you're a lunatic. All right. And he fired 16 shots. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really, know too much about Glocks, but, I think that's about the amount of shots a Glock 19, Glock 19 probably has 19 shots in it, but certain Glocks have, 16 shots, 13 shots, whatever. So he almost emptied a clip in 3 different directions inside an apartment building. That right there, that activity was enough to be fired from his position because he clearly showed that he's putting the lives of his fellow officers in danger and the neighbors in the situation in danger because it's not a secluded location. It's an apartment building. So if you shoot a certain direction, you might hit Granny that's over there just watching Wheel of Fortune. If you shoot over there, you might hit the kids that's in their bedroom in the next apartment over. So that's why he got fired. And the problem is just like it starts at the top. You focus on this shit is wild. I saw an explanation about that too. Just letting it off, man. Like he was just shooting. Like, and that's the problem. Like, in that type of situation, that's check for the departmental, causes to be for termination. And that's also check for being, indicted in a criminal case and leading up to criminal charges. Feel me? So that's at least enough to be fired. And that's what was proven off rip. Because, when the department comes and looks at it, they do their internal research and everything. They're like, okay, he did this, he did that. That's bullshit. He's supposed to be fired. We're supposed to train them better than that because at the end of the day, training is key. Officers with the proper amount of training do not act in that manner. Officers that do not wish to, kill because they have a bloodlust or have a feeling to actually kill individuals do not act like that. An officer that's coming into a situation where it's low visibility and he's shooting in 3 different directions in a apartment complex does not give a fuck about who or what he's shooting at. So that's the problem that led him to be fired. That led to Detective Miles Cosgrove to be fired, and that's justly so. But the problem about that is the officer, Brett Hankinson, was the first person that shot. And when he shot, he recklessly endangered the lives of the neighbors during the raid. And he also missed the shots at Breonna, and he also didn't know where he was shooting at. And he also really was the person that initiated, like, if the first officer comes in shooting and he doesn't know where the shooting's coming from, he's just shooting. That's a problem. He also got the same thing because his shooting prompted the other officers like Cosgrove to then open fire and shoot sporadically in that situation. So that's why Brett Hankinson was the one that actually got indicted first on the criminal charges because they're like, it's kind of your fault in that situation. But if we're really going up the ladder to see whose fault it was, we can focus on Detective Joshua James, who actually wrote up their warrants that led to these officers being put in that situation that then led to the death of Breonna Taylor. So if we're really focusing on who should be arrested, on who might have the implications, who might be arrested and actually have a technical case in court where they can actually go to jail and you can see some, some accountability. Those 3 officers stemming from Detective Joshua James, and then secondly, going over to Officer Brett Hankinson. And then lastly, I believe the officer who actually shot and killed, Breonna Taylor, he's also in that mix because of just how many shots he shot and in the different directions that he shot those shots and how he endangered the lives of the other people in the apartment complex. Those 3 officers are what the main focus should have been, but because of all the misinformation, because of all the things we were seeing on social media, because of how it just so easily like coaxed into the Black Lives Matter, protests and everything, I think it was missed. And it wasn't until months after, things started to settle down that we started getting to the real nitty gritty and the truth of the situation. So because those three are the actual officers that should be arrested, now that leads us to the next portion of how can these officers get arrested and be charged? All right. So the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, he's the person that decides on indicting these people. He's the person that then brings up the grand jury to then see if they can go to a criminal court, to actually go to court and then start the whole criminal process. The problem with that is that special prosecutors, there's really no accountability between them and law enforcement because they want to keep a positive relationship with law enforcement. The thing about it is, like, you got to understand, prosecutors work with police officers to put bad people away. And sometimes not just bad people, feel me? Black people. Like, you got to understand, like, it's the dynamic. If I'm a prosecutor, I work with my the police department because I need them to come on the stand. I need them to trust me enough that I won't say anything that's going to jeopardize their career or that it's going to negatively implicate them into any wrongdoing that could cause them to be, charged with a crime. I need them to trust me to come in, get on the stand. I need to humanize them, get their information to then put the defendant away. That's the kind of connection and relationship that prosecuting attorneys have with law enforcement. And when you look at situations like this where law enforcement are actually getting targeted, that's the issue, because the same people that, were protecting him, I'll scratch your back if you say, he did this and you scratch my back, by coming onto the stand. I get my conviction rates going up. You get your arrest, certified in the books. We both get a win. On to the next one. That's going to really trip you up when it's time to, prosecute that same person. It's like if if I got a right-hand man in the drug business, feel me, and then, he does something foul, now I have to lay him down. Am I really going to shoot this man because he did something foul? Because me and him go way back. You got to understand, there's levels to this type of encounter. And that's why people are getting pissed off, because black people are getting disproportionately, or the probability of actually getting an officer to go on trial and then go to jail because of a crime of shooting and killing an unarmed black person is very low, because the same people that help them, put these criminals away are the same people that are going to be up on stand looking for a jury for them and then putting them on trial. And I don't think that they even pick the jury to then give them a fair enough trial to be like, okay, let's look at this indifferently. Let's look at this without any emotion. Let's look at this with just the facts and then actually go to trial with them. Because as the prosecuting attorney, as the attorney general in this situation, he's the one that's picking the grand jury. So he's bringing the officers in, feel me, in that situation, humanizing the officer, feel me, asking them if they know anything about the Breonna Taylor case. And that's a tough question to ask because it's nationally recognized across the country and even across the world. So unless you live under a rock, you'll know exactly the Breonna Taylor case. So you have a situation where the media itself is tampering or, contaminating the jury, because in the legal process, in order to get a case to trial, you have to get a grand jury selected. Once you select the grand jury, it takes a process of, striking the jury. You got to, pick and choose who's going to not be biased, who might, fall into your, who might believe your case. So you're trying to pick and choose who's going to, be the best person to make you win. It's not really, and it sucks to say, in the criminal justice system, it's not really a case of right or wrong. It's really just, I want to win. As a prosecutor, you want to win. As a defense attorney, you want to win. So you're going to do whatever you have to do to win. And it doesn't matter if that's justice or injustice, because if they make this system centered around winning, people are going to do whatever the fuck they're going to do to win. It's like the same thing about playing video games. Like 2K21, people got a Curry shuffle in the game, right? They're not going to study dribble moves and actually learn how to move around the court. They're going to study the 2K shuffle, the Curry shuffle, a cheap little trick, because it's highly effective and it allows them to win. It allows them to score. So if you allow things in your system that make it easier for somebody to win, why would you expect them to actually operate, morally, ethically? The people are just going to operate to win. So in this situation, the attorney general, he has to weigh on one side, do I want to ruin the relationship with police departments? Because if you go after one of them, it's not like you're going after just one officer. You're going after an entire union. You're going after an entire department. It's like there's never just one officer. It's like roaches. Like you see one roach, it's never just one roach. Like you got to call the exterminator, because if you see one, there's a bunch of people, there's a whole conglomerate, there's a whole union of officers backing that officer up. So as a prosecuting attorney in this situation, you're looking at it like, do I want to ruin that relationship that's going to make it harder for me to keep my position? Because they can easily replace me, feel me? If my numbers aren't up, I can easily get replaced. Or should I actually just, try to pick a grand jury that's not going to charge these officers with any criminal offenses, because I can do that. And I'll let you believe it for yourself, because if 3 officers went on trial, well, technically they didn't even get on trial. If 3 officers were brought in front of a grand jury and all 3 officers were found not to have any criminal charges put up against them, then what does that tell you? Did the prosecuting attorney in this situation, the attorney general that picked the grand jury to actually put those officers on trial, did he do his job accordingly? Or did he do his job to maintain his relationship with the police officers in that situation? And that's where you see the corruption. That's where the frustration should lie in, because now you're understanding this is how the criminal justice system works. It's not just about proving if that person did the crime or not. It's literally understanding that you have to target the system that's going to put people in power that are going to protect the same people that you want to see go to jail for their wrongdoings. So what can you do? At the top level, it's just another system. That's just how it works. Like, we can't be mad as people, and we can't just, we can't just go out there and be like, yo, arrest the cops. This is bullshit. Yeah, they'll arrest them. They're not going to jail. Because you don't know the attorney general. You don't know the judge. Like, this is why when people say, yo, if you want to change the system, you either have to totally annul the system or inject the system with a virus that's going to slowly change it over time. And in this case, you are the virus. Black individuals, you are the virus. If you want to change the system that is oppressing you, then you have to install a strong enough virus that's going to be strong enough to maintain its identity and mission while it's being injected into the system. It's that simple. But it's not a simple process, feel me? Because it also makes you, it challenges your thought process. It challenges your way to think, that you're going to be like, instead of telling this kid to be a ball player, whatever, I'm going to tell him to be a lawyer and try to tell him to become a prosecutor. But in that situation, he has to understand that he's still working for the people. So when he's in that position and he's putting people away, he has to use some level of discernment to decide what's right and what's wrong. And when it comes time to actually challenge the system, I need to make sure that he's mentally tough enough to challenge the system. One second, I got to take a drink of water. And I want you guys to understand, in this situation, Attorney General Daniel Cameron, he's a black man, but not all skin folk are kinfolk. Now, that's what you need to understand. Now, he's a black man in a position that he's dealt with a lot of white people in that field. He's dealt with a lot of, he's put a lot of minorities away. And you can tell in the way he responded, he was really more focused and geared on, let's focus on the facts. You guys really don't understand what's going on. He's trying to protect his position. He's trying to protect his reputation with the local police department. Because let's say this black attorney general actually stood up and said, out of the 3 people here, one of y'all has to go to jail, because one person did something that caused this event to happen by falsifying some information on the no-knock warrants that led to this actual no-knock warrant raid being initiated. And the people that were in the raid, you guys acted extremely stupidly. Like, you acted with the utmost ignorance when brandishing your weapon and shooting it. That led to the death of an EMT worker that was in no way connected to this entire situation. Now, you can say that the connection was, she dealt with a drug dealer back in the day and, he sent her a package. The package, like the detective that spoke to the mail person, the investigation that led after that was unfounded. They found out that it wasn't drug paraphernalia. It wasn't even connected whatsoever. It didn't occur to these people that she was probably just an ex that wanted her stuff back. Like, that's what exes do. Like, but the problem is, it's like on one side you have this intoxicated, this corrupted system that will protect its own and then, give you a $12 million settlement and just try to tell you, fuck off and be happy with that. And on the other hand, you have black people that actually try to avoid that system, that are some way connected to that life, and it still get labeled, you're a criminal, you're connected, you're the problem. And that's the like, to actually get the right results out of this situation, on one side, black people, you have to distance yourself. You have to be the most angelic person possible, because if you are connected to the streets in any way, that's what they will use to get you. And that's what they will use to try to brandish their case. That's what they will try to use to get, find their way with warrants into your house to lead you inside an investigation. And that's what they will use to criminalize you on social media and on the news. Because I remember, when we were looking at the story, we were like, oh yeah, she was living with a drug dealer. She was, she was part of that life. Now that we know the full story, she wasn't really. She had left that type of person in her past. But the fact that she even, dealt with a person like that was a mar on her reputation. And that's the issue. Like, you don't get the luxury when you are this color to play around with people in the streets, because they will get you caught up in one way or another. It's either you're going to get involved in like the gang related shit that is going on, the drug related shit that's going on, or you're going to get caught on the legal side where they're going to target you as the weakest link, saying, you're really not part of it, but you're part of it, so you can go to jail. You don't have that luxury. You don't have the complexion for protection. Like, when they see you, they think, oh, that's a low hanging fruit, because he probably doesn't have any lawyer friends. He probably doesn't have any people in the court system. He probably doesn't know any officers or people that can actually, defend him. That's a low hanging fruit. That's something that we can get in jail to help our quota, to help ourselves. Because at the end of the game, it's all about, it's a game. It's a hustle. The fact that this man, Daniel Cameron, did not indicted 3 officers and none of them faced any criminal charges after that, after he selected a grand jury of his choosing, shows something. That's just how the system operates. Now, if you're really mad, if you're really upset, it's either you inject the system with a virus strong enough that knows its identity, that knows what it needs to do to change the system, and keep injecting the system with that virus, because the system will fight back vehemently. It will change that virus. It will change some of the people that you put in there into becoming a part of that system. It's deeper than this. It's deeper than just black and white. And if you understand that it's a system entrenched in your failure, that thrives on your failure. It's not just, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to throw trash cans in stores and I'm going to just, be mad and, just abrasive and civil unrest. Yeah. That worked for a week? You gave all these companies how much millions of dollars in insurance claims? What did you accomplish? You just showed the whole entire world, yeah, you're some angry black people in a system that you have no power to change. And the real way that you can actually change the system, you don't want to do because you're comfortable. We're all comfortable. It's either you completely ignore the situation, the system. You completely separate yourself from the system, but you can't do that in this country because this is the system. This is the operation. This is the matrix. or you fight the system in a way that you can't battle it head on. You can't battle the criminal justice system head on because you don't have the power or the hearsay to make the changes on the criminal justice system to actually completely shut it down, to make any type of change. In order to inflict real change, it's a top down thing. Like we got auntie off the syrup bottle. And then that's another thing. We keep settling for symbolic changes, symbolic victories. No, we shouldn't give a fuck about Aunt Jemima. We should be caring about the stocks or the company. Like I remember it was this one dude that came on the Joe Budden podcast, right? And he came on the Breakfast Club. He has his own podcast. I forgot his name. His name evades me. I can search it up on the computer later. You know what I mean? But he said, imagine if black people actually were united in the front, just the same way how people came against Wall Street on Wall Street bets. They came against the hedge funds people when they were trying to short the AMC stock and the GameStop stock. Imagine if black people had that type of unity and power when it came to stocks. Imagine that. Imagine as black people, we see a company like H&M. They don't, put, I'm the flyest monkey in the jungle on a black boy shirt and have a black boy model that. And we'd be like, we don't like that. And we feel like your PR should have known something about that. We're going to shorten your stock. We're going to all collectively choose to not invest in that. We're going to make sure you financially hurt because you hurt us. That's power. That's change. That affects real change because they know you're not a people to mess with. They know you're a people that's unified with power, with economic power. Money talks. Y'all know this. Black Lives Matter Boulevard on 2K. We said already. That's the thing. Symbolic changes. And another thing with the Black Lives Matter movement, you gotta understand that thing was hijacked. Of course, it started off with the right reasons. It started off with, maintaining the integrity of the situation. Understanding that Black Lives Matter. As a black person, you don't need a Black Lives Matter movement to make people know that. Your life matters. It's always been Black Lives Matter since you were born. Your black mother took care of you. Your black father took care of you. Your black aunt took care of you. Your black grandma took care of you. Your black friends watched out for you. Feel me? It's been Black Lives Matter. If your mindset did not click at some point where that this system was not for you, then I don't know. Maybe Black Lives Matter was the awakening call that you needed, but it's always been Black Lives Matter since you realized you were black. But now we let Cold Blue, we let some Democratic politicians hijack the Black Lives Matter movement that then had taken millions of dollars in endorsements and in charitable donations. And where's that for the black community? Who got a check? You ain't get a check. I think we all waiting for the stimulus check, but where's the Black Lives Matter check? It didn't happen, did it? We didn't gatekeep our own movement, and it was taken from us, and then they profited off of our struggle. Let that sink in. Got to start moving like it on our own feet. It's that simple. We got to understand that it's more than just politics. It's more than just a presidential race. I have other videos that I'm going to do a few things about. I don't really want to touch on things, but when it comes to this Breonna Taylor situation, this was not racially motivated. It was not racially charged. But the system that allowed this to happen is. Do you understand that? The system that's going to target you for trying to hustle and make it out the hood any way that you can. Either it's going to be selling drugs, selling CDs, selling Lucy's, selling whatever. The system that puts you in that position to have to struggle like that, and it is then going to put you in jail. That's what's racially charged. And the system that's going to then notice that it's going to find some black people that have nothing to do with that situation, that have nothing to do with that lifestyle. It's going to kill them and make sure the officers don't go to jail. That's racially charged. Not the individuals in the situation. It's the system. Now, sure, we can say, yo, these officers need to go to jail. I can agree. It might be hard, getting any one of the three to go to jail because You would have to get rid of the attorney general. You would have to change the system that allows them protection. Are we going to do that? Are we going to put black people in those positions? It's not about, hey, it's November, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, we got to go vote. It's deeper than that. When was the last time you went to go vote for your local councilman? Who are the House of Representative members for the state of New York or whatever state that you're in? Who are your senators? Like, that's the type of stuff that matters, because those people are who put and elect the prosecutors, the attorney generals into those positions that then protect these police officers that do stuff like this. I'm not saying that all officers are racist. I'm not saying that most officers are racist. But the ones that are getting away scot-free, that's because we're not actively engaged in this system. We're just bending over and being the low-hanging fruit. And when are we going to be tired of that? Because I see that people are tired. You're rioting. You're protesting. Yeah, you're angry. Like in the movie, like in the TV show American Gods. Like Nancy said, yeah, angry gets shit done. But direct that anger to the right things. Direct that anger into your books. Direct that anger into your trade. Direct that anger into only hiring black. Only supporting black. Make your people strong enough. Because if you don't see us as a people, if you don't see me as a brother, if you don't see like her as a sister, then that's what's wrong. Because it all starts here. We not going to see the change that we want, within the next day. We're not going to riot and protest and see change within the next month or years or 10 years. But guess what? You remember this feeling and you devise your game plan to make sure you and your family and your own and your friends that look like this, that share this complexion are good. And you raise the next generation with the full mindset and knowledge of understanding this is what you have to do to make the change in this place that you don't belong. If we're really dedicated to seeing change and to actually staying here in this country, then we got to actually start moving like other cultures move. They pool their resources together. They bond and stick together. They only support them. And they look at everybody else. They might not hate you, but you ain't one of them. And that's what black people need to start doing. Hire black. Elect black. Buy black. And maybe you can just buy back some of the fucking power you've sold off in the past. But it's real life. Rest in peace, Breonna Taylor. And it sucks that we got to see people who are actually trying to be like the positive images that we want out there die. And it angers me that people like that will die in this system. Because the system failed Breonna Taylor. But it was never meant to protect her. That's our job. That was one of our sisters, man. That was one of our mothers. That was one of our aunts. That was one of our cousins. And she died because of a system that wasn't even structured to protect her. She died because she actually separated herself from that lifestyle and was doing good. But this system that keeps everyone down failed. Actually, it didn't fail. It did exactly what it's supposed to. Those cops didn't get arrested. No cops that actually did anything. The 3 cops that I mentioned, they didn't get arrested. Oh, they got arrested. They didn't go to jail for this. They got fired. For a few months, they actually still got paid before they got fired. So that's lovely. And then they went up against an attorney general that looks at them as allies, that looks at them as friends, as colleagues and co-workers, not as somebody who needs to be held accountable. So if you want to see things change, pay attention to who's your attorney general. Study their case-to-case briefings. Study how their conviction rating is implicated or connected to, a certain quota in the police department and the law enforcement agencies. Hire ethical people. Elect ethical people. It will take a lot to overhaul. Like in an ideal world, black people would have been involved in the election process in that local town in Louisville where it's just like, okay, we can elect this mayor, we can elect this councilman or woman. We can actually, go to this booth and, every year we find something to vote for. We'll find a person that really is striving for us and supporting us, and we're going to double down and vote for them. Even if we don't win, we are going to show that we are unified behind this cause of getting people that actually support and recognize the struggle and recognize who they are. And we're going to get them in positions of power. Because in an ideal world, we would have got somebody that wasn't Daniel Cameron, that decided to protect officers that clearly did something wrong. They did something that was wrong enough for them to be fired from the department, but not wrong enough for them to be held accountable in a criminal court. But hey, fight the power, right? Let's throw some trash cans at the Burberry store. That'll teach them. I ain't gonna do nothing. If you want to see change, you got to be the change, and it really starts here. We're not gonna raise another generation that's gonna be docile, and that's what we really need to recognize. Rest in peace, Breonna Taylor. A year later, none of the officers are in jail or in prison. Why is that? Well, that's it for this episode. Comment section podcast, PH episode 5, titled Breonna Taylor, the Queen that Became a Casualty. And it sucks that we're gonna see more casualties, but I like how it's gonna be an awakening call for the people that really want to see change. Start supporting those black people that want to actually get into law, that want to actually get into the medical field. Stop listening to the music that's going to glorify the street life, glorify some dumb shit that's not going to see any change. Start operating like you are actually one solid unit that cares about everybody succeeding. One of my favorite movies is Paid in Full. Favorite hood movies, feel me? Paid in Full. In the Ace, he says something that anybody with any type of street morality knows. Like, everybody eats. But in order for everybody to eat, things have to be done. So we want everybody to eat, but we're too busy fighting over a seat at the table that wasn't built for us. Go out there and build your own table. Even if you have to eat on the floor, you'll eat till you get enough resources to start building something. Then brick by brick, then piece by piece, you will have something solid. And then we don't have to worry about depending on people like an attorney general to make something change. Because when I saw that, when I saw that $12 million settlement pop up, man, I knew they weren't going to send none of those officers to jail. Because if you study this system, you know the traits, you know the signs. It's like studying any game. I don't hate the player, I hate the game. But at this point in my life, I know how the game operates. Second you saw that settlement, you knew nobody was going to jail for that. And it sucks. Breonna doesn't deserve to be dead. And the messed up part about it, that's almost as picture perfect. That's almost the most angelic model we can get for an unarmed black person being shot. Even though the situation that her boyfriend did shoot back. But like I said before, no sane black man or woman will hear the police knocking at their door and pick up a gun. I wouldn't even pick up my phone because I'm not trying to be a poster child for no movement. So you believe what you want to believe, that they had a no-knock warrant. They didn't have to knock. They didn't have to say anything. But the fact of the matter is they should have never had that warrant. And the person that made that happen, Joshua James, he's fired, but he's not in jail. The family has $12 million. He's looking for work in the private sector. His community's gonna rally behind him because, in his eyes, in their eyes, he's a good guy. And that's why it's so easy for people to get caught up in the whole black versus white thing. Because if you really look at it, sure there's racist factors, sure there's racist people, but They're just doing their thing on their end, and we're just doing our thing on our end, and the system pins us against each other because we're in different positions. Some people are in positions of power. Some people are the powerless. So I want you to really look at this Breonna Taylor situation a year later and just think about how you're going to retrieve some of that power that's been stripped from you, that's been barricaded from you to for you to attain. Like, it's sad. It really is sad. But that's about it for this episode, man. Rest in peace, Breonna Taylor. And I pray to God there's not another one. But you already know how the game operates by this time. It's just a matter of time. Well, good night, people.